Those are the words of my wife or about to be ex-wife, used as caption for a picture of her and her employee Henry on her WhatsApp story 3 weeks ago. The whole drama in my relationship played out for 6 months, but I try to keep it as concise as I possibly can. I'm all at 37. I've been married to Judy, 32, for 2.5 years now. It's hard to pick out a single defining moment for everything that has happened so far, but I believe it all went downhill after that ding phone call. I was in the sitting room watching highlights of football matches I had missed for the previous day when my wife's phone started to ring, irritated by the sound of ringtone, continuously cutting into the commentary of the game. I took her phone to her in the kitchen, telling her to deal with whoever was calling. Just then the phone rang again and she looked ready to pounce on the person on the other end of the line because we both worked in the corporate world. Judy had this rule of never letting our office life interfere or cross into home time. She believed it was our social responsibility as humans to separate work from home. She led a private life and often encouraged me to do the same. She never answered work-related phone calls on weekends and preferred to get emails for situations that demanded her immediate attention. I turned to the kitchen's exit, half expecting her to go off at any second, but it never came. She fell silent and her countenance changed. However, it wasn't until dinner that she decided to let me in on what the phone call was about. They were transforming out of state. She said, "Transfer? Why? Where?" I asked. As soon as those words left my mouth, the realization of the situation hit me. I told you about the company's expansion. Apparently, the board wants to transfer people to the new site to monitor the development of the branch. She explained. I knew how transfers work, but more times than not, they transferred people without external commitment. She was a married woman. There was no way she would even be considered for a transfer if she didn't ask for it. I asked her. She applied to be transferred. She said no. Then it came with a promotion. That promotion, she said. It became clear what the situation was. Judy was an ambitious woman. It was one of the many qualities I adored about her. And for the past year, she worked her butt off for the promotion they were offering her. She volunteered, worked extra hours, and even went out of her way to ensure her team of 7 functioned the way it was meant to without issue. It was finally about to pay off, although not in the way we expected. Her salary doubled with lots of perks and benefits. But I knew it was never about the money with her. She was more interested in working her way up the corporate ladder. What do you think I should do? She asked at the back of my mind. All I could say was F. It wasn't her fault, but she was putting me in the incredibly difficult situation. I had 2 distinct options. I could either tell her to reject the transfer, which would have cost her the promotion, or I could be supportive and give her my blessings to pursue something she had worked so hard for in my head. I thought people made long-distance marriages work all the time. I hadn't exactly seen any, but there had to be some instances, right? I was in a state of disillusionment, but not wanting to be responsible for holding her back. I faced her and said, I'm going to support you, whichever decision you take. We can make it work, whichever way it goes. Boy, do I regret those words. Her eyes lit up with excitement, and in that moment I thought I had made the right decision. It was going to work. I convinced myself. I had friends that traveled on business trips all the time, spending months away from their family and still sustained a spark in their marriage. Looking back now, she never really gave me much of an option to refuse. If I had offered my genuine opinion and asked her not to take the job, she would have agreed. But I knew Judy enough to tell it would come at a cost and the end game would be letting the marriage collapse on itself. I didn't want that. I also didn't like that she was going to be extremely far away from me, but if our marriage hung on the line, the lesser evil was letting go. It looked like the only logical decision. And faced with a similar situation again, I'm not sure how I would have chosen differently. She spent the rest of the evening thanking me for being understanding and whatnot, but all the while I couldn't shake off the wave of irritation that coursed through me at the realization that my wife had goaded me into feeling more self-conscious so that my decision was in her favor. She had baited me. I was sure of it. However, it was hard to stay mad at her seeing how excited she was. After all, the arrangements for her travel had been finalized. We had a lengthy discussion about how we were going to make the marriage work. It goes without saying that we were going to call every day to ensure we were still involved in our daily lives. The issue of cheating never actually crossed my mind because I thought Judy is too goal-oriented to even want to consider it because we got our company to agree to give her 5 days off every month. It'll work, she assured me just before she boarded the plane. Little did I know that my marriage had ended in that instant. Every long-distance relationship always starts out the same way. Calls around the clock. I even got her one of those Bluetooth earphones so we could talk while she worked. And for the first 2 months, it looked like it was working. We were on the phone more, and I knew more about her life than I did when I was living with her. Suddenly, it didn't feel like I had made the wrong decision, putting her ambition over my needs. I felt like we were in a good place, and we were at least until 2 months ago. Judy called one morning to cancel on her trip back to Michigan. Her company's quarterly performance had been below par, and she had to work on recruiting more capable professionals to fill out administrative roles to help make her job a lot easier. I didn't mind. I was on the verge of closing a huge deal that would have given me more flexibility to how I work. The compensation for closing the deal was worth millions. With that, I could be closer to my wife. 5 days was inconsequential when I could be with her for as long as I wanted. I kept the deal away from her because I wanted to surprise her after it had been sealed. To make that happen, I needed to be at my best, which meant no distractions of any type. I didn't call her and she didn't call me. It was the longest we had gone without talking on the phone. We still texted on WhatsApp, but we were both too busy to enter into any meaningful conversation. I'm explaining how everything happened because a few days ago a mutual friend of ours called me callous and manipulating after she heard what happened. And if you ask me, I'm neither of those things. If anything, I consider myself a victim, which is why I'm here recounting everything as it went down between myself and Judy. Anyways, back to the story. The deal came through and it was only a matter of hours before everything was finalized for good. It was one of those types of deals that people considered their big break. Only thing was I had already had my big break with the first client ever closed. This one was a game changer. I was going to be a part of the elite 10% of America that night while I waited for confirmation. I scrolled through my phone feeling very tempted to call her. It took every bit of self-control to stop myself from doing it. I wanted to tell her everything that had happened in the past week and how our lives were going to change. Judy's biggest dream was a trip to Paris. Instead of calling her, I made plans for a vacation there. The ticket, the hotel, food, places to visit. I had everything sorted out. It was going to break the news together at once. A scroll through my WhatsApp and landed on her story. She was hugging this guy, Henry. Tall, olive-skinned, brown hair, blue eyes. He looked no younger than 35. He was the first person Judy employed when she started working. He was from the area. He knew about the job and she needed his expertise. Underneath the picture, she captioned "Dark Times Reveals Angels." I should have suspected something was wrong. I think I did because I held off from telling her that the deal came through. And it did. Instead, I took the next available flight I could find to California to see her. As you may have already guessed, she was having an affair with Henry. I called her company in Michigan to inquire about the details of my wife's location as I was planning a surprise visit. Luckily, the receptionist that answered was a mutual friend of ours, so it didn't take much to convince her not to tell Judy I was coming. All through the flight, I kept playing out scenarios in my head of how I expected her to react. Once I told her about the deal, I went to her branch directly from the airport, hoping to take her to dinner to break the news to her. But I was informed she had not reported to work that day, so I had to Uber myself to the address I was given. All the while bothered about why the receptionist at the branch was surprised to find that Judy was married. However, I didn't press. I knew how Judy liked to keep her life as private as possible. After 4 flights of stairs, I arrived in front of her door with a bouquet of flowers behind my back. The minute I was about to knock on the door was when I heard my wife moan. Something along the line of "keep going." I felt sick to my stomach. All it took was 5.5 months away from me for her to cheat. Rage erupted within me, threatening to overwhelm every sense of reasoning in me. But I did my best to remain quiet. I left her apartment and drove back to her office to tell the receptionist that attended to me not to say anything about me visiting. I even tipped her with $100. I lodged in a hotel close to her apartment to keep a close watch on her. In the week that passed, I followed her around with a rental and she was unsuspecting. She triangulated between work, yoga, and her apartment, making it easy to keep track of her movements. It was how I was able to tell that she spent a lot of time around Henry, and it wasn't exactly rocket science to deduct. He was the one she was cheating with. I called and messaged her during this time, but to use work as an excuse and begged me to give her space to get her professional life in order. It was then that I decided I wasn't going to let myself be played by her anymore. I drew up divorce letters and waited for when she came in with Henry. It felt like all I did was have sex because the second I arrived at her door, it was all I could hear: groans, grunts, and moans. Picking a lock, I walked in, tiptoe into her bedroom with my phone on record, as disgusting as it was to watch. I took a 4-minute clip of them having sex before announcing myself. In that moment, while she scrambled for clothes, I felt powerful. It was a sad and hurtful experience, but the pain in her face when I told her I was going to share the video with all of her coworkers and family members and she didn't sign the divorce papers made everything worth it. She begged for me to forgive her, saying she was going to resign and go to therapy, but I felt disgusted by her. I mean, who wouldn't? Every time I saw her, images of Henry putting himself in her made me want to roll over and puke. She was asking for the impossible, and I wasn't going to entertain her. She told me she resigned from her work when she dropped a signed copy of the divorce papers yesterday, but it didn't stop me from sending the video to her parents. I want them to see the type of child they raised. Wow. OP. It sounds like she was out of the relationship the moment she took the job. She had definitely been wanting this for a while and probably cheating on you for a while as well. That's super unfortunate, and I'm so sorry she manipulated you into agreeing to take the job. She definitely didn't give you a choice in the matter, practically forcing you into saying yes when making huge life-changing decisions like this.